You people really like me talking about the undead. I drew up a poll and you had the options of a Mad Max style wasteland, a mushroom trip of a kingdom, or an alien invasion that focuses on butt probes for brain matter. But this time around, we collectively decided that we are taking a trip to a mall, casino, or wherever. But just like the Walking Dead episode, things are going to be a slightly different than usual outtake when it comes to a survival analysis. This week, we cover the Dawn of the Dead ripoff, Shop Till You Drop, Will of the Wisps, an Instagram photographer's dream. There will probably be a Netflix special for each psychopath. The zombies are such a joke that it's literally a playground of the dead. Capcom references a mix and match of anything you can find lying around. To be frank, we are heading west, Latino flavored revenge game itself. This week we are telling you why you would probably survive a Dead Rising zombie apocalypse. Warning, with these scenarios, I do get into the story of the franchise, so this is your one and only spoiler warning. Originating in the fictional city of Santa Cabeza, somewhere in Central America, a secretive research team was outposted within a facility there in order to find a way to double the production of meat supplies in the United States due to food supplies slowly being dwarfed by demand. Because, as you know, over half of apocalyptic scenarios stem from overpopulation and people trying to solve that major issue. In the nearby Pachacamac River, a previously undiscovered species of wasp, soon to be scientifically referred to as the Ampulex compressa gigantus, a slightly altered version of the real-life emerald cockroach wasp found in South Asia and Africa. How this insect wound up in the United States is a mystery. However, it is possible it was introduced as an invasive species. Now, this may really bug you, but based on the methods in which the emerald cockroach wasp kills cockroaches, actively stinging them in a specific spot to paralyze its front legs, while also stinging again in a secondary spot, inhibiting the part of the roach's brain that tells it to flee and resist. While the roach is disabled and unmoving, the wasp will devour parts of the roach, but only enough to keep it alive. The wasp will move the roach to a secluded location, plant an egg in its stomach, bury it so it can't escape or be eaten by predators, and flee. The newly laid wasp egg will eventually hatch, eat through the roach's organs in a timely fashion, as to keep the roach alive long enough for the wasp to mature and erupt from the dead carcass of the cockroach. What intrigued the scientists in the Cabeza facility was that these newly discovered wasps, similar to the emerald ones, were much larger and way more broadly violent, titling them all queens. Instead of searching out cockroaches to plant their seed in, they will seek out any available living host, not just those roachy boys. They also will not paralyze, eat, and move their victims to secluded locations. With there being much larger hosts, they simply just rely on implanting their eggs through injection by their stings. The egg is allowed to enter the spinal column and travel upward toward the brain of a lab rat, livestock, or eventually human, consuming brain matter and lying dormant within the body. That's right, you have a baby wasp inside your brain eating you from the inside out. Normally, the body's natural immune system would recognize this invasive substance and attempt to defend itself as it would a disease or parasite. However, the Ampulex egg actually is able to covertly submerge in the body without any reaction, allowing the egg to produce a particular para-hormone into the brain that will amplify the hunger and thirst of the host. The person affected will eat, drink, and take in energy as much as possible, not knowing anything consumed will actually be going directly to the parasite, while making sure that no apparent symptoms arise to alert them and those around them. Eventually, if the larvae resides in the brain long enough, will trigger the host into eating unnatural sources of substance, aka cannibalism, forcing the host into thinking anything can be eaten as long as it can subdue its everlasting hunger. They will hatch from their cocoon eventually and run rampant, forcing the host into convulsions and sporadic behavior. This was the observance in livestock and other testing animals, showing signs of paralysis, severely hindered motor skills, and if injected by wasps multiple times, quick death, as the brain cannot handle multiple parasites at once, hence why we only ever see one queen wasp emerge from a zombie. With the advent of the parahormone and the wasp effect on the hunger part of the brain, scientists at the Cabeza facility had hoped to utilize it to solve America's growing demand for meat production. However, in 2006, one of these wasps managed to escape the facility and quickly began the Santa Cabeza zombie outbreak by injecting these eggs into people who thought they were just merely stung by a wasp. The town was quickly overwhelmed as one stung victim became a zombie, and with this wasp taking over the victim's brain, was able to generate an infection that could spread through biting fighting, which means zombies did not need a queen wasp in them to become an infected individual, causing a massive uptick of zombie personnel that were bitten. In order to keep this incident from becoming global news, the American government dispatched a special forces team to wipe out any and all accounts of what happened in Santa Cabeza, effectively wiping out every zombie and a live civilian, excluding Carlito and Isabella Keys, who were able to flee with a flock of orphans. Carlito, seeking revenge, escaped with the virus and somehow went from Central America to Colorado to unleash the plague on the unwilling population of Willamette. The town of 53,594, much like Cabeza, was quickly overwhelmed, forcing survivors to retreat to the town's mall, in homage to the classic 1974 classic Dawn of the Dead. The subsequent 50-mile quarantine of the Colorado town leads to the beginning of the Dead Rising storyline, where Frank West helicopters his way atop the mall to cover the outbreak and eventually discover the conspiracy of Carlito's terrorist attack, spurred by the government's involvement in Santa Cabeza. West uncovers the plot, takes down Carlito and the special forces sent in to wipe out info on the outbreak, and escapes with Isabella to reveal what happened to the world, resulting in the creation and enforcement of the Willamette Act, which sought to barricading cities with a zombie outbreak of up to a 50-mile radius around it, carting out any infected to a screening process, and cleansing the land with fire once everything is said and done, after a 72-hour cycle. In order to aid those affected by the virus and were bitten, Isabella Keys was spared a life sentence in jail in order to aid with a vaccine for the virus called Zombrex with the company Phenotrans. The advent of Zombrex allows people to regularly prevent fully succumbing to the zombie virus, but that would also mean you would have to be lucky enough to have been bitten in a less vital spot like your arm or leg, where the infection would spread far less faster than if you were bitten on your neck. While the vaccine proved to be very effective as a daily dosage, it also piqued the financial, greedy interest of Phenotrans top dogs and investors. They decided another outbreak was needed in order to create more queens, bring up demand, and jack up prices. Basically, just dealing with a very demonic version of Martin Shkreli. In 2008, under the guidance of Phenotrans director Marianne Milan, her security officer Harjit Singh unleashes multitudes of the wasps at a Las Vegas 250 event, thus setting forth the outbreak in Las Vegas. The government quarantined Vegas as a protocol, but eventually completely blew up the city, killing over 100,000 people, while a million more were able to flee, but were infected with the zombie virus. In 2011, the same misfortune fell upon Fortune City, who had tried to replicate the once glitz and glamorous city of Vegas, unleashing zombies that were captured in cells for a game show on unsuspecting victims, starting up the horde and making a plethora of new infected in the process. Chuck Green was framed for this outbreak since his wife was killed in the Las Vegas attacks, but this act of terrorism would soon be linked to Phenotrans once more. In 2017, government officials came up with a very Orwellian solution to keeping infected citizens consistently vaccinated by implanting Zombrex chips into them. While it did administer dosages daily to prevent turning so people wouldn't forget, it also contained a GPS tracker that many refused to take part in. 4 years later, in 2021, Isabella Keys began another zombie outbreak that this time spread through Los Perdidos. Keys' true intention was to find one of the orphans from Santa Cabeza that Isabella and Carlito intentionally infected into the world with numbered tattoos on their necks. Dead Rising 3's protagonist Nick Ramos was the 12th orphan, who was the only orphan who naturally cured the infection instead of harboring it and becoming a zombie. Nick fought his way through Los Perdidos during his outbreak, meeting those affected by the Willamette and Fortune City outbreaks in the process. After a number of events, Secretary of Defense General John Hemlock sought to harvesting king zombies, zombies that harbored swarms of infected wasps, as bioweapons, and killing the US president in order to start a massive outbreak that would enforce martial law and have him as the unquestioned leader of a panicked country. However, due to Nick's intervention, this plan would not come to fruition. Nick was able to escape with his friends, and a cure was able to be made. By the year 2022, most zombie outbreaks had been quelled and subsided. However, the original Santa Cabeza facility had still harbored the virus and wasps that originated everything. When a soldier named Calder attempted to procure data and vials of the virus, things got a bit crazy. Willamette ironically had been stricken with another zombie outbreak, which had fallen on Black Friday. Yes, this time the concentrated form of the virus led to more aggressive, stronger, and frankly faster zombies that were completely resistant to Zombrex and the cure. In Dr. Barnaby's last audio logs, he discerns that after around 50 years of further study and development, the negative side effects of the zombie contagion, like, losing your mind, becoming unbridled with rage, and a literal walking, rotting cannibal could be disabled. And the positive effects of never aging, never tiring, or ever becoming sick could be harnessed. That would be after 50 years of further research, basically creating an immortal human being that can only die by being fatally wounded. However, due to the immediate and obvious violent and widespread nature of the disease, governments and terrorist organizations would seek to weaponize this outbreak rather than waiting half a century to see if immortal life can be achieved. It would seem like this hypothesis would be a reality with the accidental infection of Calder, who used the intended emergency chamber of Dr. Barnaby after being exposed to a concentrated air mass of the virus. Retaining full control of his mind, he became the first intelligent zombie to walk the earth, while also fully utilizing the exosuit that looks like something straight out of Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. A deadly combination, a zombie and an exosuit. Frank was able to stop Calder, but only to sacrifice himself and be swarmed by the zombies he evaded and combated for decades, completely turning and gaining our first look through the eyes of a deadite until eventually he was apprehended and slowly transmutated back into a normal human being by Barnaby's chest chamber. While he was a zombie, he did display some super deadly and frankly scary abilities, being able to hunter pounce, throw up, and all that. Basically, he was just an amalgamation of the original Left 4 Dead Special Infected. But once he became a human again, he would spend the remainder of his days having nightmares of the dead and an unbridled craving of the flesh. Ugh. All starting from a science experiment of wasps gone wrong, terrorism and revenge, and subsequent greed and lust for power, the wasp invading hosts, taking over their body and making them bite others, expanding numbers exponentially, becoming incurable. And much like a parasitic insect that started it all, the newly created zombie will have only the thought of finding prey to cultivate and spreading the disease further. The threat that the Dead Rising zombie outbreak provides has varying levels of danger, becoming exponentially more threatening depending on who is involved in starting the pandemic and what their intentions are. Time and time again, people wanted it used as a weapon or forced problem with a profitable solution. What is ever more pervasive is the notion that humans are the truer danger than the zombies themselves. But with the basic lore out of the way, the main threat of the zombies, well, isn't really all that bad. Yeah, a single bite could put your life in danger. That is, of course, in the initial outbreak of the virus. Before government intervention could supply those kept within a quarantine area with zombreks, people would be in panics as riots would ensue, seeing people kill each other, get bitten, convert, rot, and sink their teeth into the local populace. Akin to many niche archetypes of the zombie genre, a person's skin will grow pale and have a grayed out blue tint, and their eyes becoming glazed and foggy due to zombification and dehydration. Their bodies in a state of limbo, most of their vital functions shut down, but somehow will still be able to walk, hunt, create grunting noises, grab, and devour, being mostly deadly, but not completely. The state of rigor mortis limiting how fast they can move depending on how long it has been since the start of the infection. They are only shown to pick up their pace when lunging at victims, but will never move faster than a somewhat fast walking speed. Due to a majority of their gray matter shutting down, they lack any kind of coordination, have no semblance of or reaction to pain, and pose no threat beyond their immediate reach and numbers. They will frequently gather and either huddle or travel in herds. They still display a sense of hearing, touch, and smell, and will in fact congregate on any loud noises. And what would it be if a horror genre scenario without nighttime making things worse? For some reason, when night falls and the sunlight's direct light fades, the zombies of the Dead Rising universe become more aggressive and able to withstand more damage, all while having glowing red eyes, possibly enabling them with nocturnal vision. Some zombies will retain muscle memory of their past life and experiences, and use it in a very rusty and deteriorated fashion. For example, former policemen can be carrying around pistols and shotguns and will even fire them. But as for the direction and accuracy of these dead officers, well, that's just going to be completely random. All it knows is to pull the trigger so they won't be pulling a Day of the Dead Bob shot. Those zombies who have the problematic queens in them are all called carrier infected, who will grasp at the air as if the queen's presence in their body is even too much for a zombie to handle, and mostly not go after normal humans, and their only natural defense is to vomit on people to disorient them and allow fellow undead to capitalize on the puked one. Killing them and crushing the wasp inside will trigger a very fortunate response in all nearby zombies, causing their gray matter and head to completely explode, possibly a brainwave that overloads the infection but proves to be effective in taking out hordes. Just don't get stung while you try to crush the queen, okay? If the virus is repurposed and redistributed out like it was seen in Dead Rising 3 and 4, it can result in stronger and hungrier infected, with further mutations gaining resistance to the Zombrex vaccine, meaning if you get bit, you ain't coming back unless you're in a specific research base. Rarely do some zombies mutate from the regular strain, but some cases have been experienced and documented. In the situation of the king zombie, which is basically a walking hive of wasps. It can release wasps that will send nearby zombies into a frenzy, and when shot can spew its noxious liquid on people to paralyze them so the enraged zombies nearby can huddle on top of them. Other zombies that are wearing stuff like a fireman's outfit or a football equipment, that's not really something that's going to be experienced too much, but they will give them some damage resistance and other melee weapons they may be holding on to. In the case of the Evo zombies we see in Dead Rising 4, they only started cropping up near the lab, so only if you're going to be located near the lab will you be experiencing the sprinting and dodgy zombies, but I'm not going to include them in the equation because if they start spreading across the country, we'll be seeing more common zombies rather than Evo. But honestly, in the game of Dead Rising, the most potential and heightened threat you will face is the litany of psychopaths that you will face progressively over each of the 4 games and their respective DLCs. However, I'm not going to go into detail about any of them, as people, namely total strangers, can always be a possible threat in any apocalyptic scenario, since walkers will pale in comparison to people who are allowed to do anything they want under the survival of the fittest, insanity, and removal of law. They can kill you in a number of ways, even run you down in a Walmart scooter or seductively snap your neck while constantly making sexual innuendos.
Get in here, boys! Move, move, Let's make this a gangbang!
People will always be more dangerous than slow-moving zombies. Explaining our way here, we can discern the title of this video of why you would probably survive. Simply put, you are facing the most generic form of what a zombie can be. You can still outrun them. It doesn't take much to bash their heads in and disable them. Yes, they can be gravely wounded anywhere else on their body, but a blow or bullet to the head can be just as easily done. Much like I said in the Walking Dead video, it's just baffling to me that it could spread so quickly when the first onset of zombies were just so simply slow, uncoordinated, dumb, and easily dispersed. Any kind of police force or even military might would be able to wipe them out pretty effectively. The fact that most people in Dead Rising 1 and 2 just sit there panicking, screaming on the floor, just being a total freaking dumbass waiting for them to be completely overwhelmed has always irritated me. Move! Any kind of rational human being would run away. They would sit in there going, they just killed my... No! Stop it! No! Stop! The only reasonable way that I could see you falling prey to this epidemic would be that you would be stung by a wasp before knowledge of the virus broke out and you became one of the initial carrier zombies. Avoiding a horde of insects is a hell of a lot harder to accomplish than avoiding a bite from a walking corpse. However, a great countermeasure to it, if you found out the wasps are the direct cause, is to wear thick clothing and layers so that the stinger cannot penetrate your skin. Now, if you have the ability to outrun the basic zombies, you are safe. If you have the ability to gain high ground by climbing, you are safe. Zombies in the Dead Rising universe become just a staple in society, kind of like a more violent version of Post-Apocalypse and Shaun of the Dead near the end of the movie, where zombies basically are an acknowledged coexistence. If it were to outbreak, be contained, and properly suppressed by vaccination, we could very well just see zombies as just another part of life, spurring game shows like Terror is Reality and zombie rights groups like Cure. However, the threat of an imposed terrorist chemical attack, government experimental attack, or other reasoning for more zombies could spring up in the world is very real. Weaponizing the virus for power or monetary gain is just something that truly goes on in the world, and if a strain of this virus were to be taken and worked upon, it's safe to say that worse versions of these zombies, with a more transmittable means of infection and resistance to vaccination, could result in a very dangerous apocalyptic scenario. But at the end of the day, if we have anything to gain from experiencing the Dead Rising franchise, is that you find yourself having the hardest time fighting psychopaths and maniacs, and they aren't even zombies. All we are doing with the zombies is just pretty much treating it like it's a playground. Following the rules set by Max Brooks' Zombie Survival Guide are a pretty go-to scenario. Find a place to hide with high ground, make sure to have enough food, water, and medicine with enough guns and melee weaponry to be able to venture out in the daytime to scavenge for more supplies. However, if you find yourself within the 50-mile quarantine radius, you will need to make sure you don't overstay your 72-hour time window. If you can drive your way out of an overrun city, do it. If not, try walking at a slightly faster pace to get to the quarantine border to have yourself tested. Luckily in this universe, most soldiers will put you through a screening process and administer vaccinations if anything is found in your bloodstream. Unlike The Last of Us, where you're just gonna get gunned down on sight. At the end of the day, or 72-hour cycle, it comes down to if you hit the unlucky lottery and your town becomes one of the isolated incidents of the infected. So finding yourself in these situations, you would want to keep your distance from the infected. Stay up high where they cannot reach you, avoid being shot or hit by zombies carrying anything dangerous, wear thick clothing or armor to prevent stings from the wasps or bites from the zombies, refrain from contacting any psychopathic individuals, and keep yourself well armed and well equipped. If you can manage to do all that with a normal wave of zombies, I think you would be very much so probably able to survive. Even at night, they aren't much more fearsome, you're just at more of a disadvantage being less visually stable than they are. If you do find yourself in a late-term epidemic where vaccines are prevalent and zombie knowledge is common, you would have an easier time, as even if you were bit, you would have a chance by trying to find and inject any outbreaks you could get your hand on. Although Big Pharma may jack up the price when you don't have any other option. The primary concern would be if things turned out like the second Willamette outbreak or Los Perdidos, where the zombies began to mutate and become more lethal. Hell, Frank's zombie form was leaping like a damn hunter. Although it's still not that big of a deal compared to the zombies of like Dying Light and Left 4 Dead, they're just slightly faster than the normal walking ones we saw originally in Willamette. Towards the end of the series, we saw zombies that were varied purely based on what clothing they were wearing and if they were holding a weapon. But honestly, it still boils down to stay out of close proximity from them, excluding the Zombie King, who can expel liquid on you to paralyze you and inject you horrendously with wasp swarm. So be smart, keep your distance, get out of the quarantine area so you don't die in a hellish blaze, and above all else, look to the west, feel green, and I can't think of anything for Ramos. But if all else fails, remember, he's reported wars, you know. Did you like this look into the Dead Rising universe? Was it reasonable to assume survival is achievable here versus other scenarios? Did I miss out or get any information wrong? The zombies are pretty much a joke compared to a lot of other universes. Blast me in the comments like usual, and don't forget to do the stuff every YouTuber says. Like, comment, and sub, donate to my Patreon or Super Chat during my YouTube live streams every Friday to be one of these fine people on the left side of my screen that support the channel. Next on the chopping block, we grace the landscape of the planet of Pandora, because making content on YouTube is a never-ending job, and there ain't no rest for the wicked. Money don't grow on trees. Until next time, I'm Zack S.A.K. Wow, such gaming, stay well. Oh God. Oh, I need to lie down. Oh, I'm out of oxygen.